a founding team will always win out in terms of fundraising over a solo founder, right? So yeah, it's important to co-founders, not just for the sake for looking good to investors, but also because your chances of success are higher, right? Because the startup journey, all right, is extremely tiring, extremely difficult, right? Extremely taxing, right? And if you don't have somebody coming on alongside you to push you sometimes, to give you ideas, right, and bounce ideas off with, right, it's very hard to proceed, right? The failure rate for solo founders is, I think, a lot higher. Fundamentally, it's like understand what you want to raise the money for, and then after that, it's very important to craft the story to your investors to tell them how you're going to use this money and how this money will support your growth.
Welcome to the Getting Funded MY podcast by iSearch. So today we have Vincent, the CEO of Eatcosys, on the show. So Eatcosys is a F&B tech ecosystem that supports F&B businesses throughout their entire business life cycle. So today I'll be discussing with Vincent on how Eatcosys managed to obtain 10 million in funding. So welcome to the show, Vincent.
Thanks, Benjamin, for having me.
All right, so let's begin. So could you share about the story of Eatcosys and also what are the problems that Eatcosys aim to solve?
Sure. So when Eatcosys first began, we began not as Eatcosys. We actually began as Vimo, which was an event venues and services booking platform back in 2014. Right. So we started very small. I think the first year revenues were so small that I don't even sometimes shy to mention. Right. But that was how we grew from a very, very small base of, I think when we started, we maybe had about 40 merchants on board the platform. And then we slowly grew over the years. But I think the benefit was really having a good co-founder come in along the way, right? My co-founder came in primarily because he was first my customer, right? He started using our platform. He started getting businesses. He started getting bookings for events through Vimo. And over time, he then became an investor and then became a co-founder, right? So together with him, Tom, right, my co-founder, we've grown this business from being just Vimo to Eatcosys. So it has been a long journey. It's been a 7.5 year coming to 8 year journey in this process, right? I think the pandemic really accelerated a lot of activities for us. For one, while the events business slowed down, the food delivery side of the business, the alcohol delivery side of the business grew tremendously. And because of that, it gave us options to grow last year. And as we grew, we then acquired more units and companies into the group. And this year, we formalized all this under the group name of Eatcosys. Right? So that's how Eatcosys came into being. You were right that when we started, we were F&B tech. But we've actually evolved beyond F&B tech now. We're actually retail tech and fintech solutions provider.
Interesting. So does it mean that the pandemic has sort of contributed to your sort of like your pivot from like event to like the F&B and also the fintech industry?
You can say it accelerated it. I mean, all this while we knew that we wanted to expand our service offerings. So in 2019, our first acquisition was Boozit, where we acquired the platform and had it part of the group, right, in 2020. So throughout 2020, it was the star performer, right? And when the pandemic came, while we wanted to do food delivery for a long time, it was during the pandemic that it accelerated us to say, let's start it, right? So on, I think March 16, the announcement was March 18 was the start date, right? I think March 17, we had a working model, working prototype first, right? And then roll it out to market, right? So we started with 7 merchants initially on the platform.
And how many merchants do you have currently?
We currently have more than 1,000 plus using the food delivery side of the business. But in terms of food merchants or F&B, we have overall over 13,000.
13,000 throughout Malaysia, or is it
throughout
just
Malaysia? Throughout Malaysia, yeah. That's because Food Advisor became part of the group as well. So Food Advisor itself already had close to 10,000 merchants. Together with the merchants that we had on Vimo and Feed My Guest, then it's 13,000 plus now and growing, right? So it's actually growing quite nicely, that segment of the business.
That's good to hear. So you acquire many different type of F&B verticals and incorporate it into the ecosystem.
Yes, into the ecosystem. Yeah, hence the name Eatcosys, right?
All right, got it.
Yeah. So that's how originally when we envisioned it was an ecosystem for F&B players, right? But because we grew quite fast out of this, then the retail side of the business also grew, and actually the retail side of the business contributes to a larger portion of our business now.
Okay. So I'm curious to know, like, how can the Eatcosys solution helps Malaysia's F&B merchants from like startup to scale up?
Okay. Right. So there are many solutions that we have, right? It can start with something as small as 200 ringgit a year, where we get you a listing onto Food Advisor, right? So Food Advisor is the leading food discovery platform in Malaysia. So if you were to Google any food item, almost any food item in any major city in Malaysia, you will find a Food Advisor page, whether it's wanton mee, nasi lemak, nasi dagang, chicken chopstick, barbecue. You will find a Food Advisor page. Usually, if it's not number one, it will be in the top 5, right? Right. So it makes it easy for our merchants to be found. I think a lot of merchants have realized that cost of social media spending, advertising is actually quite expensive, right? It's not cheap at all, right? If you continue at it over a long run, right? It's easily going to cost you maybe 200 or even more a month, right? So what we want to do was provide merchants a very, very cost-effective way for them to have all-round, all-year discovery opportunity. And that's the reason why we priced it very, very cheap. So that's one. Correct. Yeah, you have constant online presence. People use Google anyway for any search that they make. Almost any search that they make. Right? So when you think of search, it's Google, right? So we optimize our pages for a good high ranking on search results. Right? That's true for Vimo. That's true for Feed My Guest as well. So then, what are the other solutions that we have? Right? Beyond that, we have point of sale solutions. Right? We have online ordering forms. Right? So let's say you only want to activate an online ordering form. You can as well. And we charge 15% for the commissions. Right? So very, very cost effective. You don't pay an arm and a leg to every time you sell something. Right? So that's one. Right? And then with our point of sale system, we've made it even more interesting. So what we do is when anybody buys our point of sale subscription, which is 1188 a year, he not only gets a point of sale system, he also gets 600 ringgit credits. This 600 ringgit credits, he can then use to either list on Food Advisor, Vimo, or Feed My Guest, or he could use it to purchase supplies. Let's say, for example, he needs to buy chicken or vegetables. He can actually purchase it from our procurement platform called Bundle Up, right? So you'll find that subscription to his point of sale system is not just a cost. It's now a profit generator as well. Yeah.
What about the delivery portion of it?
So the delivery portion, if they subscribe to our online order form, right, we do have a delivery system as well. But we make it very open. They can manage the delivery themselves, or we could help them manage it. So there's a different cost involved, obviously. Without us managing the delivery, it's less than 15%. It's only 2% plus 2 ringgit.
Okay, because there's a lot of buzz on like Grab and also Foodpanda charging very high commissions on that. So what are your thoughts on that? And
I mean, they spend a lot on advertising, right? So sometimes they have to pass that back down to the merchant, right? And I can understand that, right? That's the business model that they have chosen to develop. I think for us, one of the good things is we already have a good deal of traffic coming into Food Advisor and all our other sites already. So that way, we can price our solution to be cost effective. And also because we came SME entrepreneurs ourselves, both Tam and I started our businesses very, very small, right? And grew from there. So we know the challenges of what an SME would go through, the pain points that they face, right? To charge them 30% is actually quite siong. So it's quite painful.
Yeah, especially during this period.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess maybe I just give a hypothetical example. Let's say I own a nasi lemak restaurant in Puchong. So I wish to list my nasi lemak restaurant in Food Advisor. So when people go to Google and they have craving for nasi lemak and they search for nasi lemak in Puchong, then they will be able to find the Food Advisor website. They click in, then they can see my restaurant being listed on Food Advisor. And then from there, can they order also from Food Advisor, or it will be directed to somewhere?
They can immediately order from there if they have a delivery activation there, right? So for example, what we'll see is, okay, you see a list of 4 or 5, maybe 10, right? Options, right? So if the delivery button is there, then the customer can immediately just click the delivery button and then make an order, right? And it's up to the merchant to choose what kind of delivery order form he wants to use. He can use something as simple as WhatsApp.
Straight WhatsApp the merchant and order.
Yeah, straight WhatsApp the merchant and order, right? We will always recommend WhatsApp for business because at least you have a catalog there. The only thing is it doesn't take payment. You still have the online transfer, right? Or they can use our order form as well. Or if they already have an existing order form with any of the other platforms, they can link it to that as well. So it's a very open platform, and the merchant is given multiple options.
I mean, whether they want to self-deliver or use your services to deliver. Okay. But I think as business owner, we will just try to outsource the delivery portion of it.
I think initially some of them tried to do their own, then realized that, actually it's a very challenging process, right? Managing riders, right? It's not easy at all.
Yeah. And I think they would rather go for you because your rate is actually much cheaper than the other 2 giants that I mentioned earlier.
I hope so.
All right. So we move on to the funding process. So Eatcosys have raised 10 million from equity crowdfunding. So could you share how's the funding journey like with us?
Eatcosys started our fundraising process in June and then through to July. So it was a 2-month process. But before that, we had actually done pre-marketing. So we had already found some key investors who would come in to support us already. So we had a target of 5 million ringgit for ECF round. We're thankful that we managed to exceed that by quite a bit, right?
By double.
By double, right? So we're very thankful for these investors because a lot of these people we didn't know before, right? And we're also thankful to some of our investors who, as they came in, they also told their friends about it. Then their friends came in as well. But I think the one that humbled me the most were the merchants who were our users, who were listing on Food Advisor or Vimo, who had seen us grow over these years. And when they heard about it, they said, I like to invest. Especially at a time like this, right? Where a lot of the small F&B players are struggling. And this is not a big F&B player. They don't own multiple lots. They're an independent store. But they chose to invest, right? Because they said, we've seen how you grow over the years. We're confident that you'll take it further, right? So that humbled me, right? And also some customers who had used our services before and then who came in as investors when they heard about it. One of them was in an investment talk and then he texted me and said, hey, I didn't know that you're raising money. You should have told me, right?
I mean, for the F&B merchants to give you the money, it means that they are really confident of your platform because they are the one that have gone through the whole process from A to Z. So I guess that really signifies that your business model is also strong, which convinces them to invest.
Yeah, it was really a real privilege to have them supporting us.
And also one thing I find interesting is that your funding period is only 2 months. Because normally the other founders that I speak is, they will say like, it's quite a tough journey. It's like maybe 7 months to a year to get these funds. So how do you get it like so fast?
I mean, like we said, we were doing pre-marketing. So even a month and a half before, we had already started the pre-marketing. So if you look at the journey, it actually started before that June start date, right? There was already a pre-marketing involved. And I think that is the success of any fundraising campaign. That you have to do the pre-marketing first. I think that's the thing that a lot of people think that the moment you go on the platform and that's it, people will start pouring money in. It doesn't happen that way. A lot of work, a lot of selling that needs to be done prior to that.
So what are some pre-marketing strategies?
Well, I think we are fortunate because this was not our first time doing this, right? This is between Tom and I, we would have done 4 other fundraise for our companies before this. Vimo did twice. Tom is also the founder of Union Cafe, right? So he's also done twice for Union. So this would be our fifth one for ourselves. And also we have assisted other companies in their fundraise as well over the years, right? So that's actually become a new line of business for us, where we do marketing services for companies raising money for ECF.
Yeah, because you have so much experience already. So I guess
we were fortunate that we started early. Yeah. Because our first campaign started in 2017. So I think we were the 15th issuer at that time.
So if an entrepreneur wish to raise funds on ECF, what is the pre-marketing steps that they need to do before they go live?
I suppose even way before pre-marketing is like, okay, when you start your company, right, make sure your cap table is clean. I think one of the things that a lot of founders forget is that, you have to make sure your capital table structure is clean, so that when you have other investors come in, it's easy, right? It's easier, right? The other thing I think would be, don't be shy to promote yourself. I'll be honest, I am a bit shyer. I'm a bit more introverted than my co-founder. I'm fortunate to have a very extroverted co-founder, right? So it balances off, right? But I think one of the things that when I did my first round of fundraising for Vimo back in 2017 was that primarily almost all the investors that came in actually came in off my Facebook feed. So one of them had actually been following me 2 years before that, right? He had been quiet, right? And when we actually then announced the campaign, then he texted me and said, I would like to invest, right? And I had not spoken to him on Facebook, right? I know that he connected with me. It was then that he connected and said, I would like to invest, because I've been seeing what you have been doing over the last 2.5 years, right? And I think you're onto something, right? And likewise, the other people who came in as well via my Facebook feed were like that as well. So that could be your initial pre-marketing, not being overly shy to tell people what you're doing, even the challenges that come along the way, because there will be challenges, right? So at least you are real, right, to your investors.
Yeah, and the investors have seen you survive for, let's say, the past 2 to 3 years, so they are more confident.
More confident, yeah. Usually the first point of failure is the first year, and then the second point of failure is year 3, I think, right? And then after that it's year 5, right? So usually those are the step holes, right? So for us, I think we've been fortunate that we've been able to get through all this, right? And this time around, some of our investors reinvested because they saw how we've grown, how we've managed to adapt to the changing conditions as well.
So in a way, your Facebook feed is sort of like your blog post to update everything.
Yes. So it becomes your marketing channel for yourself, for your company. Of course, now there will be Insta as well, right? And we see some of our merchants who use Insta very, very effectively. One of our merchants, almost, I think 90% of her sales comes in through Insta.
How does she do it? Any Insta? Because Insta, there's so many different types of strategies. Which one is the one that gets the best?
I'm not sure. I got to get her to do a talk one day, right? Because I got to learn from her as well, right? And I think that's a very powerful thing to learn from her. How they grew their business. They started their business on January 13th this year. The second lockdown began on January 11th.
Wow. And yet they're doing so well.
Wow. They are doing so well, yeah. It's wow, really.
Okay.
Quite impressive, yeah.
Okay, good to hear that. So Eatcosys have raised 10 million of funds. So how do you plan to utilize these funds? Because the next step is where the sort of like the headache comes in, where to deploy the funds.
Well, we're fortunate that we've already had a plan as to what we want to build and what we want to deploy. Obviously, one of our biggest challenges at the moment has been in terms of managing the growth, right? We actually have quite a number of projects sitting on our table at the moment where we need more hands to work on, right? So we're actually recruiting, right? So if there are any tech talent out there, right, who is looking for a job, right, please feel free to send in your resume, marketing talents as well, right, to help us grow our business, right? So that's one area, all right, in terms of headcount. The other area is in terms of tech deployments that we're coming up with, right? So we will be announcing some new initiatives before the end of the year, right? So those would be, and then after that, more new initiatives after that. So we're upgrading the tech services that we have to our customers to make them more integrated. Because prior to this, you see us as Vimo Feed My Gas, Food Advisor, My Cooking Story, right? Bundle Up. We're all separate services, right? But the value of coming together as a group now is that we're able to bring all this together and leverage on the data that we have to be able to better market and better offer services to both customers as well as our merchants.
So there's two sides of it. So how do you get more F&B merchants on your platform?
I guess because Food Advisor is pretty well established, likewise Vimo and Feed My Gas as well, is that we do already have steady inquiry of merchants coming in. However, what we've done is, at this moment, we have accelerated that. We've done more marketing on it so that more merchants are aware of our services, so they can sign up faster. And we do this purely online. So one of the things that the pandemic has made available to us is to be able to onboard almost all our merchants. Actually, no, not almost. Right now, it's 100%. All of them are onboarded digitally, right? Prior to this, you would have to visit them because they, it's a very relationship driven community. The F&B industry is like that, right? You got to see, you got to meet up with them. But right now, because they understand the situation, it's okay. We can do everything digitally, and because of that, we're able to grow our footprint actually in places like Johor, in Kedah, quite effectively and efficiently. Right? So we've got new merchants coming up from Sungai Petani lah. Some towns that I've never heard of even.
Yeah. So previously, before the pandemic, you have to, let's say you want to list Sungai Petani on your platform, a restaurant in Sungai Petani, you have to employ people
have to go there. Correct.
So now it's like, even if I'm in KL, I can just online to liaise with them and list it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I onboard you entirely, purely digital.
Okay. So that's one good benefit of the pandemic, I guess.
That's a good benefit, yeah. So I think that the realization that digital is the way to go is certainly top of mind for many merchants. I mean, there are some merchants that find it very, very difficult to adapt as well, which I understand because they've been doing their business for 60 years, right? Without change, then suddenly this hits them. So, but I also see that, for example, like some of these merchants where they don't know how to handle online orders, they get their children to handle for them. Right? So the son or the daughter then passes on the message to the father or mother.
Since they're at home anyway, so it's easier to communicate among themselves.
Yeah. And sometimes this, I see that some of these children are actually professionals. They are either accountants or lawyers, so they have part-time job being order takers for their parents. Okay.
So I think F&B industry, especially the restaurants, they're taking a very big hit now due to the pandemic. So what is your, for people who are F&B merchants and they're watching this, what is your advice for them to come out of this?
I think one of the things is that, yes, you will say that, the delivery giants are taking too much of my profit, right? Which is true, right? But I think what they are facing at the moment is not unlike the challenge that the hotel industry faced maybe about 15 years ago, right? 10, 15 years ago, where the OTAs, people like your Agodas, your Booking.coms, your Expedias, your Pricelines, started gaining the ascendancy, right? Where this was where people went to book. They don't book on your hotel brand website anymore. They book on Agoda because you get points on Agoda, right? Or you're just using Agoda so much that you will use it. Hotels started realizing that was a challenge. So they limited the amount of rooms that could be sold to the online travel agents, right? And then they started doing their own, making sure that to their customers that, okay, maybe you want to sign up as a member with our brand website, right? Then you can buy from us at prices that give you additional benefits, because there's a clause they cannot sell below the OTAs, right? But there's no stopping them from giving extra value, right? So that's the thing that I think the F&B industry has to go through right now, understanding that there are other channels as well, not just the delivery giants, not just Facebook or Instagram, but a slew of channels that will help complement your business, right? So you must learn how to sell through multiple channels, right? One of my partners always loves to say omni-channel, right? So yes, it is omni-channels now, right? It's not a single channel of sale. Right. And if you rely only on a single channel of sale, obviously whoever controls your volume of business will control you as well.
Okay, understand. So it's to be listed in as many platforms that have already generated that branding, and you just list it so that you are part of that branding.
Correct.
So that when
Correct.
people go
Yeah,
to there, then they can search for your restaurant.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. The challenge then, of course, if you have too many platforms, then you have to manage multiple platforms to say, okay, where are the orders coming from? Very hard to reconcile. So that's where we're trying to fix that, right? We're coming out with a solution that will help them integrate all their orders from different platforms into a single order form, right? So that it's easier for them to manage.
Okay, I understand.
Yes.
So whenever they get the orders, they do have to check so many different places. So everything can be in sort of like, is it one app that they can check everything? Or is
it would be a web service and coming to an app, right? So it would be something that would be easy for them to use on their phone, right? So they don't even need to buy a computer. It's just on their phone that they are able to do this.
Okay, great. So what is your number one advice for entrepreneurs who wish to raise funds for their business?
I guess it would start with what's your goal for raising the funds? What's your reason for raising the funds? Right? So sometimes it's raising the funds for working capital, right? So that you can help you grow your business. Sometimes it's also because you're raising the funds because you are looking for a strategic investor who can not just give you money, but also give you the growth structure, the network and the structure to grow. We have always looked at it when we raise funds more from a strategy angle first, then a working capital part as well, right? So there are two parts to that, right? So we balance both, right? So I guess that's the important question. Or are you raising money just to try to get over, to survive, right? Nothing wrong with all this. So fundamentally, it's like understand what you want to raise the money for. And then after that, it's very important to craft the story to your investors to tell them how you're going to use this money and how this money will support your growth, right? And that doesn't happen in that 2-month period. This happens before already. This happens years before.
The pre-marketing phase.
Yeah, your pre-marketing phase, your startup phase. So from the time you started up to the time you raise money, all this has been, it's lockstep, right? Every step of the way, it helps to get you to a point where you can raise money. Because if you just appear out of the blue, unless you're very famous, right? Unless you're a seasoned entrepreneur, people know you the moment they hear your name, right? They say, oh, this guy's starting a new company. I want to invest in him. Because people are investing in you. Yeah, they throw money at you. But that's because you have a track record, right? So again, it didn't happen out of the blue, right? It happened because people know you and people have seen your track record. Right? So I think there are a few entrepreneurs like that in town who are like that, right? Where the moment they come out with something new, people will back them.
Okay. So for first-time entrepreneurs who is say a nobody yet, you would recommend that they come up with sort of like a story for their business first and slowly build up from there?
I guess it's starting your business and asking yourself, right, why am I doing this? Right? Am I solving a problem? Will it make an impact, right? So if it does, right, can I build an MVP, a minimum viable product that people would use? And then from there, as more people use it, okay, can this be scaled, right? If it cannot be scaled this way, can I scale it in other ways? Can this be my entry point into the F&B market or any market for that matter? And can I grow from there? So for me, Vimo was always an entry point. It would not have been the scale point because events are large ticket items. It requires hand-holding along the way. So in terms of scaling, it's a bit more difficult. Can be done, but it's a bit more difficult. So for us, what we needed to do was we realized we needed to diversify to things that people would use on a daily basis. And that's where the e-commerce portion came in, the food delivery portion came in, the food discovery portion came in.
Okay. And how important it is to have a co-founder in getting funds? Because usually, I don't know, like investors, when they see you are just like a solo founder, is it much more difficult?
I believe it is. I think the studies have shown that a founding team will always win out in terms of fundraising over a solo founder, right? So yeah, it's important to co-founders, not just for the sake for looking good to investors, but also because your chances of success are higher, right? Because the startup journey, all right, is extremely tiring, extremely difficult, right? Extremely taxing, right? And if you don't have somebody coming on alongside you to push you sometimes, to give you ideas, right, and bounce ideas off with, right, it's very hard to proceed, right? The failure rate for solo founders is, I think, a lot higher. So yeah, I'm very thankful for my co-founder, right, for having been there for me.
So how do people identify and find a good co-founder?
I think somebody likened it to like finding a spouse, right? So it's almost as important as that, right? Finding a spouse is important. Finding a co-founder is equally as important, because having good co-founders, having good partners in the business makes or breaks the company, right? Because you're already fighting battles outside. You don't want to fight battles inside as well, right? So inside is where you should build up one another. Of course, you will fight internally on ideas to make sure that the idea is sound, the business is sound. But at the end of the day, the internal structure is what supports the business, right? So if the internal structure is tearing inside, then very hard to go and fight a battle outside.
So I would say that you need to know your co-founder for at least a few years before you even consider him or her joining on board.
Ideally, that would be the case, but sometimes I think it's a fit as well. So Tam and I got to know each other initially as a customer-vendor relationship. This was in 2015 when I first got to know him, right? Over months, we developed a friendship, but really, he just saw us as a way that we could bring business in for his business. So he saw the value of the business. So at least he sees value, right? So he invested, right? So he became an investor. Later, then he became a co-founder as well, as he got more and more involved in the business. But I think that took a bit longer, because as he understood what I'm doing, what I understood his driving principles as well. And as we combined, then we were able to understand each other and grow from there, right? So right now, I think we're a very strong support structure for each of us.
Okay, great. So to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
I guess, if it's a last word to your audience to say, okay, should I begin the entrepreneur's journey, right? Sometimes along the way, if you asked me maybe about 2.5 years ago, I think the answer would be mixed, right? Along the way, it's like there were so many challenges along the way that sometimes I actually wondered, right? How did I get through some of those periods? Because it was actually quite tough. And as the business was growing, also there was another problem, right? We had business, but cash flow was still tight. So sometimes it's that kind of challenges, right? I should have just stuck with my corporate job, right? And get a salary every month. So I guess my last parting word to anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur is, if you want to embark on this, yes, the journey is interesting. But the interesting bits comes with a lot of challenges, a lot of downs before you get your ups. Sometimes when people say, oh, you raised 10 million, wow, and you did it over 2 months, but there was over 7 years worth of background work that we needed to do. Before that, we had also learned a lot of the stuff that we were doing before that, right? So it's a very long journey. It's not a 2-month journey. It's actually a multi-decade journey to get here.
Because now everyone is like, the entrepreneurs like the buzzword now. It's like everyone wants to start a business. So I think
it sounds sexy to be an entrepreneur, but actually there's so much unsexiness in this line that sometimes I wonder why, right? So if my son were to ask me if he wanted to become an entrepreneur, I would suggest that he would go work in a corporate job first,
so that he can compare in the end which one is better.
Yes. Yeah, it would give him good grounding as well, right? Give him some stability initially, right? Because a startup journey is always full of uncertainty, full of excitement for sure, but a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, but I guess we are privileged. We feel very privileged to have taken this journey. We're very thankful for all our investors who have put in money. Maybe because there was this is a pre-IPO race going towards an IPO. I think we are the first ECF campaign where a pre-IPO has been done, and I think we are also the first company that has gone from ECF to ECF to ECF to a planned IPO by 2023 or 2022 earliest.
Okay,
Yeah.
So before the IPO, this 10 million will be it already. You don't have any more plans to raise further funds before the IPO. This will be the final one.
This will be the final one. However, we're still talking to some large funds, so strategic funds, right, that could help drive up the strategic value of the company before IPO, right? So this will be strategic funds in terms of who they are and what they bring to the table in helping us grow further.
Okay, got it. So thanks, Vincent, for coming onto the show. Check out Eatcosys down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin.